We have lots to discuss in today's video, including some more trade talk around the Vancouver Canucks, the whole Elias Pettersson, JT Miller situation. One podcast today was talking about the possibility of JT Miller maybe going to the Toronto Maple Leafs and how that might be able to benefit both clubs. We'll discuss that possibility, plus further discussion points that were brought up today by various NHL insiders on the Canucks and those two players. Plus, Frank Saravelli discussing the Buffalo Sabres, wondering if maybe a player like Cousins or Byram is not the answer in the deal that we may see. That could we see something more significant like a Rasmus Dahlin or an Owen Power? We'll discuss how that could work. Plus, Rangers defenseman Zach Jones has spoken out about being frustrated with a healthy scratch. We have a signing in Colorado, an interesting social media post from Connor McDavid that's got people kind of perplexed here, and Preds forward Zachary Luda facing a significant suspension. We'll discuss all that and more coming up next. Well, welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, there's lots to discuss here today, lots of interesting tidbits and some interesting news. So let's get started, and certainly recommend you keep listening and watch all the way through. Certainly big news today from the Department of NHL Player Safety, suspending Predators forward Zachary Luda for 3 games for a tripping/slew foot situation on Minnesota Wild captain Jared Spurgeon a couple nights back. It was certainly, to me, looked deliberate, looked intentional. There's a fairly significant injury on the play, and I think 3 games is more than justified. Now, he doesn't have a rap sheet yet in the NHL, but he's racked up a lot of suspensions over the years during his time with the Halifax Mooseheads in the QMJHL, and I believe he's been disciplined on a couple of occasions in the American Hockey League as well. So certainly a player with a bad temper and undisciplined past, we'll say. He certainly can be an effective player, but certainly somebody that I think Nashville needs to rein in, because they don't need him to become the same player we saw in junior with all those suspensions. It's a little bit reckless at times. I'm sure the Minnesota Wild are not thrilled here. Yes, he goes out for 3 games, but they're going to end up losing their captain for more. So certainly a well-justified suspension here, in my opinion. We also got news today from the NHL waiver wire. Today, Utah placed defenseman Dakota Mermis on waivers. Of course, they picked him up on waivers earlier this season from the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I'll be curious to see if anybody else puts in a claim. If not, and the Leafs do, then they can certainly send him directly to their AHL franchise. Now, if other teams put in a claim, then he may or may not be able to go back to the Leafs and would not be eligible to go directly to the AHL if indeed that's the case. So it's hard to say what Toronto's going to do here, right? Because if they put in a claim and other teams do as well, then they won't be able to send him directly to the American Hockey League. And they'll have to keep him on the NHL roster, which could cause, other complications here. But if they're the only ones, they can send them right down. So we'll see how this works out. But Mermis is on waivers, and we'll find out tomorrow afternoon what the outcome is. As I mentioned, lots of roster updates and some injury news. We'll start with Minnesota, since we were just discussing the suspension. We found out today that Wild captain Jared Spurgeon, they're calling him week to week. They're saying that it's not as bad as they had originally feared. Certainly not good news either way. It's not like it's a nothing type of thing. Like week to week oftentimes is 2 to 3 weeks. And considering what most teams are facing for a schedule in the month of January, especially where February is light because of the break for the Four Nation Face-Off tournament, most teams have 14, 15 games. So even in a run of 2 or 3 weeks, he could easily miss 8 to 10 games. It wouldn't be shocking if that was the case. So we don't know an exact timeline. Week to week is kind of vague, but like I said, it was not as bad as originally feared, which is always good to hear, but still significant enough. The Blackhawks today called up Colton Dach, so he'll get a chance to get into the Blackhawks lineup. The San Jose Sharks today also activated defenseman Mark-Edward Vlasic, so he'll be back in. Carl Grundstrom has been moved to injured reserve. The Vegas Golden Knights have also recalled Tanner Lazinski as well. Nashville, with the situation with Luda and an injury, they're also bringing up Ozzy Weisblatt and Spencer Stastny. And the Ottawa Senators tonight in Dallas get back Artem Zub, who's been out for over a month with a fractured foot. He returns to the lineup this evening. Anton Forsberg also, after missing a couple of weeks with an unknown, we don't really know what happened, except that he was injured in the gym. We don't know exactly what it was, but he is back tonight. He's going to be the backup goalie. He won't be starting, but the Sens are on a back-to-back tonight between Dallas and St. Louis. So it looks like Muriel is going tonight with Allmark being out. Forsberg, I would suspect, most likely plays against the Blues tomorrow. With that in mind, they also sent Mads Søgaard back to the American Hockey League. So with Zub going into the lineup, looks like Matt Palo and JBD will be the two defensemen that are out. And Travis Hamonic will remain in the lineup. By the looks of things, they're going to go to the least amount of disruption here and put Zub with Tyler Kleven. Now, as I mentioned, some other updates here today. We have a signing in Colorado we'll get to here quickly. Left defenseman Keaton Middleton. It gets a 2-year contract extension, so this is a pretty good deal for him. It's a 2-year deal at league minimum. Year 1 is a 2-way contract, but he's guaranteed $500K. And in year 2, it's a 1-way contract. So that's certainly, promising and an upgrade on what he's had in the past. So Middleton getting a 2-year extension with the Avalanche. Zach Jones, as I mentioned as well, had some interesting comments. Not surprised, after being a healthy scratch a number of times, expressed his frustration and desire to want to get in and play and all that. I was reminded by the reporter that the last time a Rangers player spoke out, they found themselves traded within a couple of days. He did say, I'm not trying to do what Kakko did here. This is not my motivation. I'm not trying to get myself traded or anything like that. But certainly, frustration continues to mount with the Rangers organization. Clearly, it's a type of year where it almost feels like they're kind of punting on this season and looking to make moves for the future. Based on what we've heard from NHL insiders, and I know what Frank Saravalli was talking on his show this afternoon, saying he expects the Rangers to make lots of moves, but he doesn't necessarily expect them to make a move with, this season in mind to try to climb their way back in it, because they've dug themselves in such a deep hole that it's probably going to be more of a case of shaking things up, to hopefully get better and be, ready to hit the ground running next year is kind of what we're to expect. Zach Jones, where he has been a healthy scratch, his name has been out there in the rumor mill, so it's hard to say if his future's in New York or elsewhere. Now, another interesting piece of news today, which is normally you wouldn't really make a big fuss or even talk about it here as a piece of news, but Connor McDavid posted on social media on his X account today, which is not something you see a lot of, and his post was directed at Austin Matthews, and it says, "Crossbar and in, let's see it." Now, of course, Matthews is out injured right now. Matthews did an interview with the media, I believe yesterday, kind of led people to believe that he's definitely going to miss at least a few games. It's really unknown. There's no timeline. They asked him, do you think this is an injury that you can get past and, just overcome during this season? And he said he's not sure, but he hopes so. So it's kind of making a lot of people think that the injury is more serious than any of us know, and that this could be a situation where he misses significant time. But for McDavid's tweet, I'm not even sure if we're even calling them tweets anymore. Where Twitter is X now. I don't know. He posted. I don't know. We'll call it a post. But it just seems bizarre. I'm not really sure what the meaning of this is, or if there's even anything to it at all. Obviously, McDavid, posting this at Matthews. Matthews is not going to be going bar in anytime soon, considering he's out injured. And there's more and more chatter about if he can't play and he's going to be missing this much time. It doesn't make any sense for him to try to play in the Four Nations Face-Off tournament. So that could be a big loss for Team USA. So we'll have to follow that situation here closely. Now, let's just mention the trade front. We're looking at the Sabres and we're looking at the Canucks. And a big deal that could be seen. Let's start first with Buffalo. Frank Saravalli on his show today was talking about a variety of things, but he did spend some time on the Sabres. And of course asked about some of the moves that we could see coming out of Buffalo after another disappointing season. Yes, the season's not over, but they've dug themselves a pretty good hole, and it's going to be very, very difficult, if not close to impossible, to climb their way into a playoff spot here this year. And it could be another season gone by, unfortunately for the fan base, where more frustration, no playoffs, and what do you do next? There's been lots of rumblings with Dylan Cousins being, mainly because I think other teams, all the Cousins talk to me is because other teams see him struggling personal struggles on a struggling team, but they see a lot of talent that they think they can unlock, and they'd love to get a chance to have him on their team, and that's why the rumors are out there, because I think lots of teams are calling and asking about him. However, it doesn't mean Buffalo is actively trying to move him. I don't think that's the case. Lots of talk about Bowen Byram, mainly because of the fact that he's a pending restricted free agent. And as it stands, unless they move out another significant contract, signing him might be very, very challenging. So because of that and the fact that he's not signed, he's drawing attention from other teams. Very young, fairly dynamic defenseman with good experience in his young career. Of course, teams are going to call and they're going to inquire. So Sarah Valley says today that the decor hasn't really been anywhere near as good as it needs to be, and that instead of trading a guy like Cousins or Byram, maybe it needs to be a more significant shift and a more significant kind of foundational type move, and maybe they need to move either Rasmus Dahlin or Owen Power. One of the two, former first overall pick defenseman. He said he feels like they're both left shot D. I know at times they've had to play on their weak side, whatever, but all that aside, he said, clearly there's been enough times when one or the other just, the defense side of the game is not good enough. And that maybe they need a different mix. And maybe Bowen Byram is the guy that should stay and one of those two guys should go. Obviously, maybe you need a different, left-right, different style combination back there. I think everybody would agree because, the stats don't lie. The decor this year in Buffalo has not been good. I mean, if you look at what they have, you look at Dahlin, you got Power, you got Byram, you got Samuelson. Like, they've got a lot of guys there that should be long-term, fixtures there. And, I don't know that there's a lot of teams that would have thought the Sabres would struggle the way that they did. So at the end of the day, they could get great value for one of those other D. If they decided to put Dahlin or Power on the market, they could get a huge return, right? So, maybe they bring back a different type of defenseman, that maybe on the right shot, for example, different style, get a different mix back there. You could probably get more than one piece, I'm sure, depending on who comes back the other way. Could we see a seismic type trade out of Buffalo? But again, like we've said before, I think that Kevin Adams and the team in general and ownership are reluctant to move any of their top players because they've seen so many top players in the past 4 or 5 years move on and have great success elsewhere, including multiple of them winning Stanley Cups. You've got Jack Eichel out in Vegas. You've got Sam Reinhart down in Florida. Those were great players that they drafted very highly, spent a lot of time developing. Those players got frustrated with the team for a variety of other reasons, wanted to move on. They did, and they found that success. That's got to hurt when you see your, what should have been foundational long-term fixtures finding that success elsewhere. Not that they didn't have success in Buffalo, they did, but the level of success they achieved elsewhere was even higher, even greater, and that's what they were hoping they would find with the Sabres. So at the end of the day, does it make more sense for them to make a back-end, foundational shift here? We'll have to see if Frank's onto something, but let me know what you think down in the comments. Should they trade Power or Dahlin? And if they did, what type of return should they be looking for? And what are some, teams that would make the most sense that could give them a good return that would kind of be mutually beneficial for both clubs? Now, as I mentioned, more on the Pettersson Miller talk. It's eating up all the airwaves, getting all the attention across all the hockey podcasts and news shows everywhere. Eventually this is going to kind of feel like we're beating a dead horse here. But at the end of the day, Elliot Friedman had said that, again, the team's first choice based on what he's talked about and heard about and looked into is for them to work it out and to stay. And for them to both be Canucks. But that they're taking calls, and they've taken calls on both players. That at the end of the day here, this is having more of an impact on a lot of other aspects of the organization, including the coaching staff, including the captain, including the other players, including other aspects of the team, and they just want it resolved. And that they're at a point where they're prepared to do something big if they absolutely need to. We saw the interview with Alvin. It with the Sportsnet writer Ian McIntyre the other day, calling out Pettersson, basically saying he needs to be better, he needs to be more mature. These are direct shots, I thought, at Pettersson. And Pettersson's out injured right now. Clearly it's a situation where Pettersson doesn't have trade protection. He will after July 1st. Miller has trade protection now. He's older as well. Who do you feel you can win with? You got to look at the age. There's a lot to do here that could be a major gamble. Rick Dollywall, who also covers the Canucks, he talked about this again today, and he said that, Pettersson signed a long-term contract, supposed to be a first-line centerman, but being a major difference maker. And, he's struggled to be that since he signed the contract. And if the Canucks don't feel like he's going to be able to live up to that contract, that they may not leave him any choice. Maybe they have to move him. Then there was the Leafs podcast with Nick Alberga, Jay Rosehill talking about would they consider a JT Miller trade to the Leafs for Morgan Rielly. Morgan Rielly, of course, a high-paid defenseman. He's a BC-born player, so going to Vancouver would be like a homecoming for him. JT Miller, of course, could be that playoff animal that the Leafs have been missing all these years. We know how badly he wants to win. Could he be the missing ingredient? Now, I wouldn't have thought the Leafs would want to trade Morgan Rielly. I don't think that they'd be out there looking for it. I don't see that being the case. But if the Canucks if they're really serious about fixing this Miller-Pettersson situation, we know that the Rangers have been heavily linked to Miller. So they're going to try really hard to bring him back to the Rangers. There's no doubt about that. So a Rangers-Canucks deal seems, possible at this point. We know Alvin and Rutherford are not afraid to be aggressive. They're not afraid to swing big. And this could be something that, is done during the season, and it could be something that happens after the season. It really depends. After the season might be easier in some aspects, but, what do you think of JT Miller for Morgan Rielly? It's certainly, we know the Canucks want to add on the blue line. Morgan Rielly's a great skating defenseman, normally pretty productive, been with the Leafs a long time. Has been a core member there. Do the Leafs believe they can win with Rielly? Or do they think that bringing in Miller and giving their decor another bit of a different look back there might be the way to kind of change the things up so that they can have a better shot at having more playoff success? I mean, at the end of the day, Rielly hasn't been a bad performer for them. I think it's fair to say that, with his contract and the role they expect of him, that I think that he could be better. But, when you look at the reasons why they haven't won in the playoffs, I don't know that we can really point our finger at him and be like, yes, he's the problem. I don't think that's fair either. So, but at the same time, you're not always trading players because they're a problem or they're the scapegoat. You're trading players because you think you can get better. And JT Miller just has those intangible traits that, he's going to go to war with you and he's going to do everything he can to win. And that's something that you can think that's fair to say the Leafs have been missing. And I can see Miller being very much a Craig Berube type of guy. So again, this is just a hypothetical. There's no linkage to these two guys, or these teams having these conversations or anything. This is just a what-if scenario from a podcast. I just wanted to get everybody's opinion. Clearly, it seems like Pettersson Miller is dominating so many headlines out there and being so much of a talking point that it feels like something is going to happen sooner than later. So that other markets are going to start to jump in and be like, well, look, for example, I mentioned Buffalo maybe doing a seismic trade for a player like Dahlin or Power. Well, what about Elias Pettersson? What about one of their top D for Pettersson? I mean, there probably would have to be more. That probably wouldn't be a 1-for-1, but still, that two foundational pieces involved with some other stuff to kind of make sure it's even for both sides. Imagine Dahlin for Pettersson, Swede for Swede. Imagine having Rasmus Dahlin and Quinn Hughes on the same decor. I mean, does that make sense? Probably not. To me, it probably makes more sense for them to go for Power. If they're going to make a move like that, I think the style of Power would complement that decor better than Dahlin. But we know how much of the history of Vancouver has with Swedish players and how much they've had success. But at the same time, if they make that move, they're trading a huge piece who's also Swede. So I don't know. But yeah, one of those top Sabre defensemen for Pettersson. Miller for Riley. I don't think they want to trade both these guys for sure. But if they're taking calls on both, there's going to be tons of talk in the media and tons of what if scenarios discussed. So let me know what you think down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.